Hello, and welcome to Painting with Stephen episode 19. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're watching this, and let's get right into it. So, if you're a regular viewer on this channel, you will see that I yet again have toned my canvas a different colour. Last week it was a greenish umber. That's just because that's what was on my palette at the end of a painting session, so I mixed it all up to make a sort of earth tone to not waste paint. This time I've decided to do something different, sort of intentionally. I mean, there was a lot of blue left on my palette, which did push me in this direction. But yeah, I toned it a sort of blue, grey, umber mix. Plenty of umber in it, although it does more just look like a greyish blue. And yeah, I don't think I'll be doing this again. The reason I won't be doing this again is it was quite hard to see. The same result could easily be done with an umber backdrop, but you know, it wasn't unpleasant. I mean, it certainly by no means was a bad thing to work on. But you know, yeah, it was rather hard to see at times what I was doing. But I mean, never impeded me to a massive extent. It all worked out for the best in the end anyway. What I will say is that, I mean, this painting was always designed to be very, very loose. I always wanted it to be very loose, impressionistic, although definitely not in the impressionist style. Although I wanted it to be abstract, I didn't want it to be impressionistic, in the sense that although I did want it to feel 19th century, I definitely wanted to echo the 1800s in style. I more wanted it to feel like a symbolist painting. I've talked about this on my channel before about how the symbolists really like to paint dead or decaying cities. They like to paint cities that felt like they were in decline from their heyday. Faded grandeur really, captured their imaginations. And as a result, Venice and Bruges were very common cities for them to paint. Venice was obviously a very, very rich, affluent city, but then sort of faded in importance in the 1800s, just as the symbolism movement was really getting underway. So Venice sort of represented to them that opulence and grandeur that had then faded into a sort of run down, sort of almost creepy, eerie, like evocative atmosphere, and Bruges was the same. Once the most important city really in that whole area of Europe, or at least very, very important in lots of political ways, and then fading into the sort of the background really when the end of the 1700s came about. So both cities were very famous places for symbolists to paint, purely because they represented this sort of collapsing feeling, this sort of place that used to be very decadent, very opulent, very important and grand, then fading into obscurity and getting old, maybe not so gracefully. But I didn't exactly want to capture anything about decay or anything like that. with this particular painting. I have done with previous paintings, although I've used more Greco-Roman classical motifs in order to capture that. But with this one, I wanted it to just feel very creepy, very eerie, and very still, almost dreamlike. I wanted to keep the painting extremely loose. I didn't want it to get too tight. I wanted it to very much feel like a fin de siècle type painting, turn of the century, 1800s type painting. I didn't want to get all stressed out about, oh God, Firstly, I wanted it not to be that time consuming because of the giant canvas I painted last week, and, second of all, I just wanted to have a little bit of fun with this one and relax a little bit while painting it. But I wanted it to be very, very evocative. I wanted it to be almost dreamlike, still, creepy, still, and very lonely. Cities. I think in particular these old European cities, they can evoke such loneliness. It's very interesting considering some of the most powerful symbolic representations of loneliness in art have really come from cities. I think Edward Hopper with his Nighthawks painting, that's one of the most incredible representations of loneliness in an image, I think, ever put to canvas or ever captured in any form or any medium, any visual way. Edward Hopper was definitely trying to evoke there's a sort of lonely sadness to city life, and I think that's 100% true. You're surrounded by these people, but yet all of them feel like strangers. I think though the way that he was doing that was he was evoking this new, almost bustling city, this sort of New York or Chicago, San Francisco type American city that was really burgeoning in the 20th century. He was capturing a different sort of loneliness, a loneliness that really was the product of the hustle and bustle of the rat race and capitalism and all of these sort of different things that were really becoming very powerful in the 20th century. And this isn't me again trying to have a political discussion or anything like that when I say capitalism. Just want to put that out there. I'm not trying to have a conversation about communism or anything like that. Definitely not. That's not what I'm all about. But I think it does obviously represent the way that life went for a lot of people in the 20th century because of these things, because of how hyper materialist and how fast paced life became. This sort of representation, an older city, a city that finds its roots in an old ethnicity, from an old culture that's been around since probably before the medieval periods, that has been built upon, has become very important and affluent and then faded. It evokes something completely different. It's a totally different energy that you're capturing with a painting like that. And that's what I wanted to capture. I wanted to capture more of a stillness and a loneliness in a different way. I almost wanted to capture, being a bohemian, or shall I say maybe a starving, failed bohemian, in somewhere like maybe a Bruges or a Venice or you know, like an old European city at that time, but I didn't want it to be any particular European city. These buildings are made up, the skyline is made up, there's absolutely nothing that's actually, you know, like it's not like oh, this is Venice, or this is Bruges, or this is Paris. It's more just a symbolic evocation of an emotion that I want to get across here. And I wanted it to be very creepy, almost not a horror painting, because that's 100% not what I wanted to do. That's a totally different style of painting. I think horror is always more overt, isn't it? It's always more in your face and almost striking because of its shock value. That's definitely not what I want to do here. I didn't want to do that at all. I wanted to more, again, create an ominous, eerie atmosphere, utilizing you know, a city motif. I wanted there to be water in there because water in a city I find so intriguing. It just creates instantly this atmosphere, this energy that I just find very, very exciting, that instantly makes me jump into my own head and my own imagination. That's why I want to visit Venice someday. I've never visited myself, but I really want to. I would find that very exciting indeed to visit Venice. And you know, I've never visited Bruges either. By the way, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Bruges. I don't know if anyone can correct me on that, but you know, I've never visited Bruges either. I would love to, but you know, it's incredible. If you are a history lover, then you know you can really go to any European city and you know, instantly feel at home and love it there. But realistically, I am more of a rural person. I'm more of a country person. I feel like you get the true taste of a culture far more in the rural areas. It's far, you know, the food's more authentic. The history is just as exciting, but in a different way. You know, you can go from monasteries and battlefields and castles, and you're surrounded by nature, and you know, you've got all of this incredible energy around you. Cities are nice for a week or two, but I certainly couldn't live in one, and I could never live in a city. I'm just not a city guy. It does not do anything for me. As beautiful as some of the architecture is, and as incredible as a lot of the motifs are, I feel realistically most of the motifs always sort of are centered upon loneliness and alienation for a reason. I find them lonely places to be. A coldness, a sort of numbness of the soul comes over you in cities if you spend long enough in them, I think. What I think is really interesting about it is the fact that going back to the sort of this is very different from what we're talking about here, but going back to the idea of the 20th century being represented by the skyscrapers and metallic, you know, concrete jungle type cities of America, you know, that you would find somewhere like, let's say, you know, Chicago or New York or somewhere like this. It's weird because the tourism around these places pretty much always just comes from the fact that they're shitholes. that, and I know that sounds really horrible and harsh, but in a way, you know, like when you go to like places like Boston, it's like, oh, you know, like this is a really cool, rough area, and you know, there's lots of crime here, and this is where the mafia operated. And then New York, it's like, oh, you better not go into that bar, and you better not go into this area, and you better not go into that area, blah 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 blah. And it's like it's marketing based on the fact that this place is a fucking complete toilet. And not for me, man, not for me at all. I don't know why you would want to put yourself in that situation. Nothing appeals to me. I mean, apart from the incredible museums, artistic centres, historical centres, after all that would be done, I'd want to leave as soon as possible. You know, that's the way I feel about London. That's the way I feel about all these places now. They've become even worse than they have historically been as well. But yeah, like it's weird how they essentially sort of market these cities based on the fact that they are awful places to be, but to tourists is an exciting thing. That's my 2 cents on it anyway. I mean, obviously a lot of people love cities. They'll think I'm insane for what I'm talking about. I'm completely wrong. That's good, that's fine. But yeah, like I wanted to make sort of quite strong use of light in this painting, which is why I'm sort of like, a lot of the focus is on what's going to be 2 sources of light. Well, actually there's 3 sources of light in the end result. One coming from a church window, and the other coming from 2 little beacons, 2 little torches. You know, sort of gas operated street lights coming from the street. So yeah, I think light and the contrast between light and dark, I think I really wanted to sort of use that here to capture a mood. And hopefully I've done that okay here. I'm very torn as to what I want to do for my next painting, because I think you know, I do want to almost try and experiment, maybe moving in this direction more, but I really don't know. I really don't know. You know, I might go back maybe to a slightly more realist direction. You know, not that I've ever been a realist painter, but you know, my last few paintings have certainly been less loose than this, although I feel like the looseness in this is actually a good thing. I wanted to keep it loose. I wanted it to feel very just you know, hazy and interesting, and I don't know, I wanted the paint work to be quite dynamic and not to get too bogged down with consistently, you know, going, you know, create this line, create that line, you know. I feel like my my Empire Falls painting, what was that, episode 17, I feel like it just really took it out of me. So I mean, I'll probably not do a 50 by 60 for a while. You know, now that I've gotten that out of the way. I mean, I've had a canvas sitting for ages now that's a 50 by 60. That was always going to be very tonalisty and very simplisty in style, more leaning towards, you know, again, between the 2 styles, you know, between the 2 styles. I didn't, it's very difficult for me sometimes to actually explore and explain exactly what I'm doing in terms of trying to mimic a style or being part of a style, because tonalism is absolutely relevant in terms of their muted colours and stuff like that, but, and again, correct me in my pronunciation, you know, George Ines, pretty sure that's how you pronounce his second name, he tended to paint more rural scenes, nature scenes, and as much as I've historically loved doing that also, his scenes tend to be very sort of almost like taking the pastoral and rural, almost romantic scenes and making them a little bit darker, a little bit more moody, a little bit more ethereal, and I like that. And that to me is really what tonalism represents to me, although there is definitely the usage of colour. That to me is really one of the most striking aspects of what makes tonalism work and what makes a toneless painting symbolism. I definitely think they're almost related skills. Symbolism is almost taking that muted colour palette and that slightly more 1800s way of painting, and that sort of slightly looser but not really, still quite strict in form, a lot stricter than Impressionism was, and really just dialing up the atmosphere, the darkness, bringing back architectural motifs and using them in very profound symbolic ways. And I think in a way they are maybe cousin skills, apart from the fact that they come from very different parts of the world. I know that tonalism comes from is it Barbizon? Is that how you pronounce it? The Barbizon school, the French school where they like to paint realist rural scenes, but whereas symbolism I think is more in the direct lineage of the Romantics, both in ethos and in style. I've always felt like that, and even the proto-Romantics like Joseph Wright of Derby. I mean, if you took Joseph Wright of Derby's work and then transformed it into 200 years into the future, I think it would almost be classed as symbolist. You maybe might have to add a slightly more still ethereal dreamlike aspect, because Joseph Wright is still very much grounded in a slightly more realist place with his work. But I don't know, man. I don't know. With something like this, for example, I don't really know how to categorize it in that way, like in the sense that if a tonalist went into a city in the 1800s, might he have painted something like this? Some people class James McNeill Whistler as tonalist, right? And of course, I mean, he's one of the rock stars of the tonalist school, right? Like his landscapes are meant to be one of the best definitions of a tonalist landscape, right? The rocket and his very hazy, almost post-impressionist stuff. But let's be honest, like there's very little in the way of relation to like someone like Whistler's work and someone like Ines's work. To me, like it's almost like you can see how they're related. Absolutely, there's definitely a mood and there's definitely an atmosphere that's shared there, but I mean, Whistler I feel like is almost more of a symbolist, he, I would probably be a little bit more happy actually putting Whistler beside a Bocklin than I would putting him beside an Ines. I don't know if anybody's actually like interested in anything like that, let me know in the comments what you think about that, because I think in a way Whistler is more of a symbolist than a tonalist, really. But he's definitely missing a lot of the maybe actual symbolic aspects, in the sense that he's definitely got the dreary blues and the creepy still like atmospheres and stuff, maybe almost dreamlike qualities, but then Ines has that stillness and that dreamlike aspect in his work too, but obviously not like a symbolist would do it. A symbolist would more do it, like a Bocklin or any of these guys. Like, there's definitely a haunting energy to their work, and I think this is where it becomes very fascinating from the perspective of, again, going back to the horror sort of aspect of things like this, unsettling, uncomfortable, or trying to evoke a creepy atmosphere. There's a massive difference between showing and telling. Horror, and this goes, for example, the difference in filmmaking between a psychological movie, a psychological thriller, and a horror movie. Horror movies are for shock value. They always are almost sort of cheap in the way that they get things done. They don't focus really a lot on plot or mature aspects. They don't try and evoke anything. It's more they shock you and they pull you in emotional directions with cuts and jump scares and all of this sort of stuff. So horror shows you what you're meant to be so afraid of in a shocking way, whereas psychological movies, they tend to more explore the psyche, right? They tend to more explore aftermaths of horrible events, or the actual protagonist falling into insanity rather than the sort of insanity itself being portrayed to you. It's a different sort of stillness, eeriness, creepiness that gets evoked there. In a way, that's how I feel about symbolism. Symbolism is not a horror thing. It's not, it's not like it's gothic. Do you know what I mean? But there's definitely a creepiness there, right? Like it's definitely there's a stillness, there's a weirdness, there's an abstractness, there's an uncomfortable aspect to the work a lot of the time that makes you go, oh, that's haunting. That's a haunting image. There's definitely a difference between a haunting image and like, for example, like Saturn devouring his children. That could be like a really bad example of horror in art, considering, for one, I think that it's a great painting, and Goya is an incredible artist, so I'm not trying to sell Goya cheap there, because at the end of the day, I mean, his I think they call them the black paintings, right? Where he started basically just painting on his wall when he was going absolutely insane. I think he went deaf and really just had a bit of a mental breakdown. That's Saturn devouring his children. That's where that comes from. I think he just painted it, like on a bit of canvas on his wall. But I think what I'm trying to say here is that that's showing. It's showing you a horrific image, and it's going, be shocked by this horrific image. Although Goya was using far more profound, I think, symbolic representation of horror than, for example, you would find in a modern horror movie, of course, because in a modern horror movie, he was still bringing in an aspect of symbolism, and he was still bringing in an aspect of the thought of Saturn devouring his young, so that they couldn't usurp him. This is what makes that painting so chilling. Whereas modern horror, it's more just sort of like, oh, it's pretty spooky. Look at this shocking thing in front of you. Bam, 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 bam. You know, hit you with information, hit you with stimulation. You'll be shocked. So, sorry for ranting on for so long about this, but I guess what I'm saying really is that the evocation of a creepy still scene is totally different from overt horror, and I think this is where symbolism is probably so powerful. Like, symbolism is definitely different in tonalism in the sense that symbolism almost reaches that stage where it's overt, almost, but it's not quite there. It's still stripped back enough to be just creepy and eerie and still and ominous and nightmare-esque, you know, whereas tonalism is almost stripped back at that a little bit more. But I still think, whether this is me almost putting my own emotions onto a piece, because I like tonalism, so maybe this is me putting my own emotional intent on a school unfairly, and if George and S was there, or Whistler was there in front of me, they would go, no, it's not meant to be eerie or creepy at all, it's just meant to be a nice looking scene. I disagree with that, by the way. I don't think they would say that, but you know, maybe I'm trying to read more into the sort of creepy aspect of the work than I should be, but I do think tonalism has an almost still evocation to it. I do believe that. I do think that is what tonalism's trying to achieve. Anyway, here's the thing. So, like, going back to I just want to say something real quick about brush strokes, okay? Like, see a lot of the time, like, see those black silhouettes on the right of the buildings that aren't in focus. They're more just meant to be sort of the impressions of these big grand buildings that are on the other side of the water, really. You know, see, when I was doing the tops of the buildings, I just painted them any old way, but then all of a sudden, you know, I started to, you know, try and paint like little tiny impressions that I did no detail whatsoever, but just impressions of maybe forms of the buildings below. And a lot of the time I'm using vertical strokes, okay? The reason that I'm doing that is because that instantly makes things feel tall, grand. It makes things sort of, it makes it stand out from the strokes that you would use, say, for the water, right? This, again, just simple usage of brush strokes like that can make a world of difference. It really can. It's very interesting in that way, like, you know, just how simple that difference can be, like, you know, between making something a certain way and another way with painting, you know, because if you just paint things any old way, your strokes any old way, it doesn't have quite the same effect. So just keep that in mind, the way that you paint, the strokes that you decide to use. Even with something very loose, an abstract like this one, not abstract but very loose like this one, it can have a big effect. So I just want you to keep that in mind. You know, now I'm painting like the illumination from a church window here, and yeah, I mean, like, again, I wanted this to sort of feel very like nobody's in the street. There's no sign of life anywhere. There's only the indications of life. There's only the hinting at life. Okay? This is again what I mean by, this whole difference between, like the showing and the telling, like, or the showing and the hinting. Do you know what I mean? I more want to hint at the fact that there is life, but we don't have access to it. We can't see it. It's not overt in front of us. It's only being indicated to us, and that gives there's a stillness to that. There's a creepiness to that, and I like that. I like the fact that there's a stillness and a creepiness to that. Who knows what's going on in that church? Who knows why it's going on? Who knows, at this time of night, why there's anyone in there? And who knows, like, what's going on in all these little dark, doorways and, that sort of dark area there where you can see that there's an alleyway sort of going into somewhere, or like there's a sort of doorway with balls on it, like a pillar ball type thing. We don't know what's going on in places like this. We don't know what's going on in this courtyard. We don't know what's going on anywhere. I like that. And that's what I mean about cities. Cities are mysterious. They can be very mysterious, evocative places, One thing that was very good about doing the blue backdrop is the fact that things like the water took like pretty much no time at all. I mean, it was almost like, geez, like, is that it? You just chuck colour on and it sort of looks good. So from that perspective, yeah, it was a success. But and yeah, here's me trying to line up the light, there's always that fun moment, isn't there, where you're going, Jesus Christ, that's not quite right. But then, and obviously remember, I'm looking at it straight on, you're looking at it slightly from a slant, so yeah, I think I got it pretty alright eventually. I got there, but yeah, just again, really playing around with light, because there's so little light in the scene. The light that is there really sticks out, and yeah, I like that. I really like that. Playing around with light in that way. But yeah, here's the end result. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It's quite creepy, it's quite evocative, which is sort of what I wanted, and it feels sort of still and eerie, and yeah, like it's got that mystery to it. And I think what also what I really wanted to achieve here was that sort of looseness and 1800s feeling of painting, and I feel like that definitely has worked in this instance. So yeah, I think it's good. So yeah, I'm relatively happy with how it all turned out. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Very, very short episodes, and I actually got it out early for a change, so there's that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this and could put up with my ramblings, and thanks for watching. Tune in for episode 20, and goodbye.